The definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. The definition of insanity in Australian politics is the former Labor President Mark Butler, because he is the bloke who was the climate change minister in the 2016 election, led Labor to the garden path that resulted in them losing. The climate change minister in the 2019 election and led them to losing. He remains as the climate change spokesperson for the Labor Party going into the 2022 election. But as you know, they've not just doubled down, they have doubled all of their commitments. Now sure, it's 30 years off into the never-never, but welcome to the world of each-way Albo, where apparently you're so stupid that simultaneously you will fall for Albo and Butler saying that there is a climate emergency, lights and sirens on right now. But the action to actually fix it? Slowly over the next 30 years. It's an emergency or it's not, Albo, but that's why we call you each way. Well, today, Labor largely cheered on as it was between 2013 and 16, 16 and 19, and again, all of the media will cheer them in, and it'll take 2.5 years for the media to learn what you and I know tonight, which is that it is always about the cost. It is always about the human cost and the financial cost, and even more bold than what Bill Shorten had, which was rejected both in 2016 and 2019 by the Australian population, is this net zero by 2050, economy-wide. So it's not just about power. It's about transport, it's about agriculture. And here's Mark Butler, well, getting a pretty easy run today in Canberra, where they all agree with him inside the bubble.
Research this morning confirms that 3/4 of Australians support a net zero emissions commitment by 2050, including more than 2/3 of self-identified Liberal voters, because Australian businesses, the Australian community understand that you can't be committed to tackling climate change, to implementing the Paris Agreement, without being committed to net zero emissions by 2050. The Prime Minister should be honest about that, instead of relying on tired 10-year-old scare campaigns.
OK, remember the Jedi mind trick. Nothing to see here. Move along, move along. Well, I'll tell you where that research came from. It was a survey in The Guardian. That's what they were serving up today as the research that 2/3 of Australians, including so many Liberals, had now all changed their mind and wanted drastic action on climate change. It's an emergency, but it'll take till 2050 for us to actually deal with it. Interesting approach if you're trying to put out bushfires. But there's another survey, some more research, that of course came out, which kind of proves the whole point for the Labor Party and the problem that they have. Firstly, they think that Australia has changed because of the bushfires. Yesterday, Newspoll came out pretty clearly. What was the cause of the bushfires? Was it climate change or was it lack of hazard reduction? Surprise, surprise, the majority of people said that it was about hazard reduction. The same website yesterday, the same Newspoll yesterday, had in it that 50% of people were not willing to pay more for drastic action on climate change. So as always, it's a scenario where 100% of the press gallery, 2/3 of Australian politics, from the left to the extreme left, all say this is what must be done. Cheered on by millionaires and billionaires who stand to make money out of the subsidies that you will help pay for. But of course, when it comes down to little old you, are you willing to pay? There is no evidence, and I'm sorry, research in The Guardian ain't evidence, that Australians have changed that fundamental of what are we willing to pay when we already pay some of the highest prices in the world for, among other things, power. But I want to introduce you to another Butler, Terry Butler. Now, Terry Butler is the environment spokesperson for the Labor Party, and she, late last year, after the election had happened, kind of belled the cat about this fundamental problem, that you can tell everyone to lie back and think of England because we're doing it for the planet, but the reality is when workers get screwed, they're going to notice. This is what Terry Butler said to a group at the Chifley Research Centre, where she basically warned that people will say that they want to do something about climate change, but are they willing to pay for it? If I said hands up right now, who's willing to take an $80,000 a year pay cut right now? I don't reckon many people would put their hands up. She continued, I'm not about to do it, but there's a real question about what people say they want, but what they are actually willing to do. Oh, by the way, there's more. Sometimes we can sound a little bit blithe when we say, oh, no, there'll be plenty of new jobs. You can see why some people would say, well, that's easy for you to say, mate. Now, Terry Butler, of course, was out there today saying, among other things, that this was a great policy. She was online and she was cheering away. Is it good Butler, bad Butler when it comes to this? People who understand the reality of the Australian market, the reality of Australian politics, that people will tell survey companies that they want action on climate change, but they will act with their feet, which is if you're going to destroy my job or make it more expensive for me to do the things that I already find it hard to do because wages have stagnated for the best part of 10 years and the number of people who are underemployed is, well, almost at a record high. For you to feel better about yourself when you swan about after flying business class to international features here, there and everywhere, go shove it. This is what the Labor Party needs to prove. It's an emergency, we're going to act now, but somehow it's not going to cost you anything, when the reality is it's going to cost you an awful lot, and it doesn't really kick in until Anthony Albanese is long gone from the Parliament. Watch this space. There's a reason we call them each way elbow. And I'm interested about the battle of the butlers.